Alright, buckle up, folks. This is gonna be a long one, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around how I got here. My name's Sarah, and yeah, I'm the one who messed up. Big time. I cheated on my husband, and not just with some random guy, no, it was with our neighbor. The one who lives right across the street. The one my husband, let's call him Chris, used to have beers with on the weekends. Yeah, that guy. Let me start from the beginning. Chris and I have been married for 7 years. We've got a decent life, nice house, 2 kids, a dog, the whole suburban dream. But over the past year or so, things started to feel off. Chris was always busy with work, and when he wasn't working, he was either too tired to do anything or just zoning out in front of the TV. I get it, life gets hectic, but I started feeling like I was just there. Like I was part of the furniture. Enter our neighbor, let's call him Alex. Alex moved in about 2 years ago. He's single, in his early 30s, and honestly, he's the kind of guy who turns heads. Tall, fit, always has this easygoing smile. At first, it was just casual hellos when we'd see each other outside. Then it turned into small talk about the weather, the neighborhood, you know, the usual. But then, one day, things shifted. I was outside watering the plants, and Alex was out front washing his car. He waved me over, and we started talking. I don't even remember what about, but I remember laughing, like, really laughing, for the first time in what felt like forever. It felt good. Too good. After that, we started talking more. It was innocent at first. He'd come over to borrow tools from Chris, and we'd chat while he was there. Sometimes he'd bring over a bottle of wine, and we'd all hang out together. But then Chris started working late more often, and Alex and I started hanging out just the two of us. I told myself it was fine. We were just friends. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. There was this tension between us, this unspoken thing that neither of us acknowledged. And then, one night, it happened. Chris was out of town for work, and Alex came over to help me fix something in the garage. I don't even remember what it was, a leaky pipe or something. Anyway, we were joking around like usual, and then there was this moment. This stupid, cliché moment where we just looked at each other. And then he kissed me. I should have stopped him. I should have pushed him away and told him to leave. But I didn't. I kissed him back. And then one thing led to another, and, well, you can probably guess the rest. Afterward, I felt sick to my stomach. I kept telling myself it was a mistake, that it would never happen again. But it did. Again and again. Every time Chris was out of town or working late, Alex would come over, and we'd pick up right where we left off. I know what you're thinking. I'm the worst. And you're right. I am. But here's the thing, I didn't set out to cheat on my husband. I didn't wake up one day and decide to ruin my marriage. It just happened. And now I'm stuck in this mess, trying to figure out how to fix something that might be beyond repair. But that's not even the worst part. The worst part is that I can't stop. Every time I tell myself it's over, Alex texts me, or shows up at my door, and I just can't say no. It's like I'm addicted to the way he makes me feel, wanted, desired, alive. So yeah, that's where I'm at. A cheater, a liar, and a complete mess. And I have no idea how this is going to end. Okay, so where did I leave off? Oh yeah, I was knee-deep in my affair with Alex, and the guilt was eating me alive. But here's the thing about guilt, it's weirdly easy to ignore when you're caught up in the moment. It's like this little voice in the back of your head that you can drown out with excuses. Chris doesn't pay attention to me anymore. I deserve to feel wanted. It's just physical, it doesn't mean anything. But let me tell you, that voice gets louder when you're lying in bed next to your husband, pretending everything's fine. Chris would roll over, wrap his arm around me, and I'd just freeze. I couldn't even look him in the eye. I felt like the worst kind of fraud. The lies started piling up. I'm going to the gym. I'm meeting a friend for coffee. I'm running errands. Chris never questioned me. He trusted me completely, which just made me feel even worse. But at the same time, it made it easier to keep going. Alex, on the other hand, was complicated. He wasn't pushy, but he wasn't exactly subtle either. He'd text me things like, thinking about you, or can't wait to see you again. And every time, I'd tell myself it was the last time. But then I'd see him, and all my resolve would just melt away. One night, things almost blew up in my face. Chris came home early from work, and I was at Alex's house. I didn't even realize how late it was until I saw Chris's text, "Hey, where are you?" "I'm home." Panic doesn't even begin to describe what I felt. I told Alex I had to go, and he just smirked, like it was some kind of game. I rushed home, trying to come up with an excuse on the way. When I walked in, Chris was in the kitchen, making himself a sandwich. "Hey," he said, barely looking up. "Where were you?" "Oh, just at the store," I lied, my voice way too high-pitched. "I needed some stuff for dinner tomorrow." He nodded, completely unfazed. "Cool. You want a sandwich?" I almost cried right then and there. Here he was, being his usual sweet, clueless self, and I was lying to his face. But instead of coming clean, I just smiled and said, "Sure, thanks." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything in my head, the lies, the guilt, the way Alex made me feel. I knew I had to end it. I had to. But the next day, Alex texted me, and I was right back where I started. It wasn't just the physical stuff, though. That's what made it so dangerous. Alex and I would talk for hours about everything, our dreams, our fears, our frustrations. He made me feel seen in a way Chris hadn't in years. And that's what really messed me up. I started comparing them, and Chris always came up short. But then, something happened that shook me to my core. Chris and I were at a neighborhood barbecue, and Alex was there too. I was trying to act normal, but every time Alex looked at me, I felt like everyone could see right through me. At one point, Chris and Alex were standing together, laughing about something, and I just froze. These were two men who had no idea what was going on right under their noses. Chris, my husband, who trusted me completely, and Alex, who I didn't even know what he wanted from me. That night, I told Chris I wasn't feeling well and went to bed early. But really, I just needed to be alone with my thoughts. I kept thinking about how this was going to end. Was I going to keep lying forever? Was I going to leave Chris for Alex? Or was I going to end it and try to fix my marriage? I didn't have any answers. All I knew was that I was in way over my head, and there was no easy way out. Alright, so here's where things really started to spiral. I thought I could keep it together, keep the affair hidden, and just figure it out as I went along. But life doesn't work like that, does it? It all came crashing down one random Tuesday. Chris had been acting off. Not in a "I know what's going on" kind of way, but more like he was distracted. He'd been quieter than usual, spending more time on his phone, and sometimes I'd catch him staring at me like he was trying to solve a puzzle. I tried to brush it off. Maybe he was just stressed about work. Or maybe he was picking up on my weird vibes. Either way, I didn't have the energy to deal with it. I was too busy juggling my double life. Then, one night, Chris dropped a bomb. We were sitting on the couch, watching some dumb reality show, and out of nowhere, he said, "Do you ever feel like we're drifting apart?" I froze. My heart started pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He shrugged, still staring at the TV. "I don't know. It's like we're just going through the motions. We don't talk like we used to. We don't. I don't know, connect." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to scream, "Yes. I feel it too. Let's fix this." But the other part of me, the part that was still tangled up with Alex, just wanted to change the subject. So I did what I always do, I deflected. "I think you're overthinking it," I said, forcing a laugh. "We're just busy, that's all. Work, kids, life, it's a lot." He nodded, but he didn't look convinced. And honestly, I wasn't convinced either. The next day, I went to Alex's house. I told myself it was to end things, to finally put a stop to this mess. But the second I walked through the door, all my good intentions went out the window. We were sitting on his couch, talking, and I brought up Chris. I told Alex about the conversation, about how I felt like everything was falling apart. And you know what he said? Maybe it's a sign, he said, his voice all calm and smooth like he'd been waiting for this moment. Maybe you're not happy with him. Maybe you deserve better. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. Chris wasn't perfect, but he was a good man. A good father. And I was the one who'd betrayed him. Still, I didn't leave. I stayed with Alex, and well, you know. When I got home that night, Chris was waiting for me. He was sitting at the kitchen table, his face pale, his hands clenched into fists. And that's when I knew. He knew. "Where were you?" he asked, his voice low and shaky. I opened my mouth to lie, but nothing came out. I just stood there, frozen, like a deer in headlights. "I know, Sarah," he said, his voice breaking. "I know about Alex." My stomach dropped. I felt like I was going to throw up. "Chris, Don't," he snapped, cutting me off. "Just, don't." We sat there in silence for what felt like forever. Finally, I managed to choke out, "How long have you known?" He laughed, but it was this bitter, hollow sound. "A while." I didn't want to believe it at first. I kept telling myself I was imagining things. But then, I saw you. At his house. Today. I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. All this time, I thought I was being so careful, so sneaky. But he'd known. He'd known, and he'd been waiting for me to come clean. "I'm sorry," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "I'm so sorry." He didn't say anything. He just got up and walked out of the room. That was 2 weeks ago. Since then, we've been living in this weird, tense limbo. Chris moved into the guest room, and we've barely spoken. He says he needs time to figure out what he wants, and I don't blame him. As for Alex, I haven't seen him since that day. He's texted me a few times, but I haven't responded. I don't know what I want anymore. All I know is that I've messed up everything, and I don't know if it's possible to fix it. So yeah, that's where I'm at. A cheater, a liar, and a complete mess. And I have no idea how this is going to end. It's been a month since Chris found out, and things are complicated. We're still living under the same roof, but it's like we're strangers. He barely looks at me, and when he does, it's with this mix of anger and hurt that makes me want to disappear. I've tried to talk to him, to explain myself, but every time I start, he shuts me down. "I don't want to hear it," he says. And honestly, I don't blame him. What could I possibly say that would make any of this okay? The kids have started to notice that something's wrong. Our oldest, Lily, asked me the other day why Daddy's sleeping in the guest room. I told her it's because he's been snoring too loud, but she didn't look convinced. Kids are smarter than we give them credit for. As for Alex, I've been avoiding him like the plague. He's texted me a few times, asking if I'm okay, if we can talk, but I haven't responded. I don't know what to say to him. I don't even know how I feel about him anymore. The truth is, I've been doing a lot of thinking. About Chris, about Alex, about myself. And the more I think about it, the more I realize that this whole mess isn't just about the affair. It's about me. About the choices I made, the person I became. I've always been the kind of person who needs validation. I need to feel wanted, needed, appreciated. And when I stopped getting that from Chris, I went looking for it somewhere else. But that's not an excuse. It's just an explanation. The other day, I found an old photo of Chris and me from when we were first dating. We were at the beach, laughing, completely wrapped up in each other. I barely recognized the girl in that photo. She was so happy, so carefree. What happened to her? I showed the photo to Chris. I don't even know why. Maybe I was hoping it would remind him of the good times, of the love we used to have. He looked at it for a long time, and then he handed it back to me without a word. That hurt more than anything. I've started seeing a therapist. It was Chris's idea, actually. He said if we're going to have any chance of fixing this, I need to figure out why I did what I did. And he's right. I need to understand myself before I can even begin to fix what I've broken. Therapy is hard. It's like peeling back layers of myself that I didn't even know were there. My therapist says I need to stop blaming myself so much and start taking responsibility. She says guilt is useless if it doesn't lead to change. I'm trying. I really am. But it's not easy. Chris and I are starting to talk more, but it's slow going. We're both so guarded, so afraid of saying the wrong thing. But at least we're talking. That's something, right? As for Alex, I know I need to end things with him for good. I can't keep living in this limbo, torn between two men. But every time I think about cutting him out of my life, I feel this pang of something. Loss? Regret? I don't even know. I guess that's the thing about affairs. They're not just about sex or excitement. They're about filling a void, about trying to feel something when you're numb. But the problem is, it's never enough. It's just a band-aid on a wound that needs stitches. So yeah, that's where I'm at. Still a mess, but maybe a slightly less hopeless mess. I don't know if Chris and I can fix this. I don't know if I deserve a second chance. But I'm trying. That's all I can do. It's been 3 months since everything blew up, and I wish I could say things are getting better. But the truth is, they're just different. Chris and I are still living together, but it's like we're tiptoeing around each other, afraid to say or do the wrong thing. Therapy has been helping, though. Slowly. My therapist says I need to stop defining myself by my mistakes and start focusing on who I want to be. Easier said than done, but I'm trying. Chris has been seeing a therapist too. We're not doing couples counseling yet, he says he's not ready for that, but at least he's working through his own stuff. He's been more open lately, more willing to talk about how he's feeling. And let me tell you, it's not pretty. The other night, we had our first real conversation since everything happened. It started with him asking me a simple question, why? I didn't know how to answer at first. I mean, how do you explain something like that? But I knew I owed him the truth, so I took a deep breath and tried. I felt invisible, I said, my voice shaking. I felt like you didn't see me anymore, like I didn't matter. And I know that's not an excuse, but that's how I felt. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then he nodded, like he'd been expecting that answer. I get it, he said finally. I haven't been the best husband. I've been distracted, stressed, checked out. But that doesn't mean you had to, he trailed off, unable to say the words. I know, I whispered. I know I didn't have to. And I'm so sorry, Chris. I never wanted to hurt you. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time in months, I saw something other than anger in his eyes. It was sadness. And maybe, just maybe, a little bit of hope. I don't know if I can forgive you, he said quietly. But I want to try. That was a week ago, and since then, things have been better. Not perfect, but better. We've started spending more time together, just the two of us. We've been talking, really talking, about everything, our marriage, our kids, our future. It's not easy. There are still moments when the weight of what I did feels unbearable. There are still nights when I lie awake, wondering if Chris will ever truly forgive me. But I'm trying to focus on the present, on the small steps we're taking to rebuild what we lost. As for Alex, I finally ended things with him. It wasn't dramatic or emotional, just a simple text saying I needed to focus on my marriage and that we couldn't see each other anymore. He didn't respond, and honestly, I'm glad. I don't need closure from him. I need to find closure within myself. I know this isn't a happy ending. Not yet, anyway. But it's a start. And for now, that's enough. It's been 6 months since my world fell apart, and I can finally say that things are starting to feel okay. Not perfect, not even close, but okay. Chris and I are still together, and we're slowly rebuilding what we lost. It hasn't been easy. There are still days when the guilt feels overwhelming, when I wonder if Chris will ever truly forgive me. But he's trying, and so am I. We've started couples counseling, and it's been helping. We're learning how to communicate again, how to be honest with each other. The kids are doing better too. They've stopped asking why Daddy was sleeping in the guest room, and things are starting to feel normal again. Well, as normal as they can be after something like this. As for me, I'm still seeing my therapist. I've been working on understanding why I made the choices I did, and how to avoid making those same mistakes in the future. It's hard, painful work, but it's worth it. I've also been focusing on myself, on who I am and who I want to be. I've started taking better care of myself, both physically and mentally. I've reconnected with old friends, picked up some hobbies I'd abandoned, and even started volunteering at a local shelter. It feels good to do something positive, to give back in some small way. Chris and I have started dating again. It sounds silly, I know, but it's been helping. We go out to dinner, take walks, just spend time together without the weight of everything hanging over us. It's not like it was before, it's different, but in a good way. We're more honest with each other, more open. I know we still have a long way to go. Trust isn't something that can be rebuilt overnight, and I know there will always be scars from what happened. But for the first time in a long time, I feel hopeful. As for Alex, I haven't seen or spoken to him since I ended things. He moved out of the neighborhood a few months ago, and I have to admit, I was relieved. It's easier to move on when you're not constantly reminded of your mistakes. So yeah, that's where I'm at. Still a work in progress, but maybe a little less of a mess than I was before. I don't know what the future holds, but for now, I'm just taking it one day at a time. And that's enough. The end.